All right, let's turn our attention now to public transport, particularly in Gauteng. Billions, we understand, being spent on projects including the taxi recapitalisation and the BRT. You'll note as the bus rapid transit systems, all millions of commuters using those, depending on what is hopefully supposed to be a well-oiled, functioning and safe system. To discuss what we need in order to get this seamless system, if we can get. I'm joined by retired University of Johannesburg lecturer Vaughan Mostert. Mr. Mostert, good afternoon to you. Thank you for coming in this afternoon. Before we talk about how do we get to this, as I called it, a well-oiled and functioning safe system, just how bad is our public transport system? Let's start there.
Gareth, in the last few weeks there have been a lot of publicity on two issues, both involving the railway. The first is the low safety record on metro rail, accidents happening almost every 2 or 3 months nowadays. And secondly, suddenly a discovery that Gautrain is losing 1.6 billion rand a year. Well, that second item is nothing new. These amounts have been spent for some years now. But to get back to the two issues, they are related in some respect. And if we discuss that, then we can move on to the broader issues of BRT. Metro rail currently is, comparatively speaking, grossly undermanaged. Gautrain, on the other hand, comparatively speaking, is grossly overmanaged. The two of them need to be brought together. Now, when we have fixed metro rail, let's assume that we get the safety right and that there are no more accidents and that trains run on time and that everyone is happy.
Doing what it's supposed to do.
Doing what it's supposed to do. The fact is that metro rail has lost 100 million passengers over the last 12 months. From 400 million a year to 300 million a year. That's 1.3 million down to 1.0 million per day. Where did those 300,000 passengers go? And what is the effect on the road network? Have they gone to buses? Have they gone to taxis? Have they gone to cars? That is a possible explanation. And how are we going to, what are we going to, is that a problem? That should be our main problem. How can we get back to 400? And not only 400, we need to get back to 500, 600, and 700, which is where we were back in 1982. Maybe we'll never get back to that level, but we need to get back to that level. And the only way we can do that is to incorporate the railway into a network of integrated transport services. That brings us to the other operators, such as the ones you've mentioned, BRT, the municipal bus operators, the private bus operators, such as PUTCO and so on. All of them are operated as independent bodies. They could be on different planets, for all we know, different fare systems, different timetables, different operating philosophies, and so on. But we need to get back to, or get to, an integrated plan. Now, this is where the government has let us down. We have known this for years, that we should integrate these services into a single entity, such as is done in countless cities all over the world. But for some reason, which I cannot explain, it has not happened.
Have they never spoken to each other? Have they never sat around a table together and ever even thrown a few of these ideas around?
They know all about it, but there is some element in the, I would point a finger at the Gauteng provincial government, which is responsible for this type of thing. It has to bring everything into a coordinated whole. And there have been conferences going back to the 1990s. But I'd like to start with 2001, when a report was submitted to the Gauteng government suggesting an integrated or an improved bus service between Soweto and its outlying areas, such as Joburg, and going even as far as Pretoria. That was ignored. Then there was a further effort in 2008 to have an integrated network, and routes were actually submitted to the government, totally ignored. Then there was the e-toll report of 2014, which brings us more into the present era, which also said public transport needs to be improved before we can start tolling new roads. And when we build roads, we must make sure that public transport is also provided on those roads.
And this is why so many people were against the e-tolling system, because they were unwilling to pay for a system that didn't work. Mr. Mostert, if I may just bring us into the solution from yourself. If you were to sit there this evening, all of these integrated, supposed integrated, wishfully integrated transport systems, I think is maybe how we'll go with this, were to call you in this evening as a consultant, give me the one thing that you this evening would tell them what to do. It's an election year. They're going to use transport as an electioneering tool, and that could benefit the commuters in the end. What's the one piece of advice, as a final question, what's the one piece of advice you're giving them?
Well, Gauteng province, the government of the provincial government is responsible for about 4,000 bus contracts. Each contract is almost a separate thing. These 4,000 buses should be pulled into a network to start with, and they should link up. They actually cover the entire province at the moment, but they do not link up with each other. If those buses were pulled together, we would have about 7 bus routes between Johannesburg and Pretoria alone, which would obviate the need for Gautrain. And if we had done this 20 years ago, we would not have needed Gautrain. And we certainly do not need 1 meter of extra Gautrain expansion. Neither do we need any metro rail expansion. We should reduce the contracts for 3,000 metro rail coaches to 2,000 in view of the low number of metro rail passengers being carried, and that should force us to have a look at the broader issues, which also include metro bus in Johannesburg, metro bus in Ekurhuleni and in Pretoria, all 3 of which should be talking to each other, but which fail to do so.
Just perhaps briefly, if you don't mind, so we've spoken about how to integrate this. There's a lot of distrust, it seems, from commuters in public transport, the various accidents. You alluded to this a little bit earlier. There is the issue of safety. We've seen what's happened with Metro Rail the past few weeks. And as far as taxis are concerned and bus accidents are concerned, those are well documented. You can throw a stone at Google and it wouldn't be difficult to find it. Let's talk about safety. Even if you were to integrate it, just briefly, do you think people would trust an integrated transport system, or are you just connecting more chaos and more accidents more seamlessly, or is that a very negative outlook of mine?
I think that's a negative outlook. Safety is covered in the Road Transport Act. There are rules about speed, there are rules about drunk driving, there are rules about vehicle, as we saw earlier, homologization and so on. We only need to implement these rules. There is not enough implementation. But a point that I would like to leave with everyone is that there needs to be a single authority in charge of all of these subsidized operators. That means all these boards of directors, one for Gautrain, one for Metro Rail, one for Metro Bus Johannesburg, one for PUTCO, one for Rea Via, BRT. These boards have no right to exist. There are too few people out there who know how to run public transport, and the few who do should be pulled into one room and be told to get on with the job.
I appreciate your time in coming to speak to us this evening. Very, very strong views, and I'm sure we'll be talking again. And, of course, we're going to try and pick up on some of these issues with these multiple authorities, which seems to be the issue this evening. Vaughan Mostert, thank you very much for coming in to speak to us here on Newsnight. A focus on public transport and integration, but also a safe integration as far as public transport is concerned. How bad is the situation in the DRC when Newsnight continues at 25 to 6? In a moment, we'll be telling you. Stay with us.